You ever stop and wonder how the universe, which is supposed to love chaos, somehow manages to build all this incredibly intricate stuff? Stars, life, even entire societies? Well, today we're going to dig into this deep and honestly pretty surprising link between simple heat and the rise of complexity itself. Okay, let's get into it.
I mean, it's a huge question, right? If the rule is that everything is supposed to get more messy over time, why isn't the universe just this uniform, boring cosmic soup? Why does it even bother making galaxies and planets and people like us?
So here's the central paradox, the big twist we're going to unravel. The second law of thermodynamics, yeah, the very same rule that guarantees your coffee will get cold, is secretly the engine behind all of it. It sounds totally backwards, I know, but it turns out the universe's push towards disorder is exactly what powers the creation of order. To even begin to wrap our heads around this, we first need to get on the same page about what we mean by complexity. What does that phrase, more than the sum of its parts, actually mean?
But how do you actually measure that more? To talk about this like scientists, we can't just go on a vibe. We need a number, something solid that captures that synergy, that hidden connection, that correlation between all the different pieces of a system.
All right, so to make this idea real, let's use a wonderfully simple analogy that really holds the key to measuring this stuff. I like to call it the sock drawer secret.
Okay, stick with me on this one. At first, you have 2 drawers packed with socks. Total chaos, right? You have no idea what's in there. But then, you learn a single tiny piece of information, a secret. They were put in as matched pairs. Suddenly, the whole game changes. You open drawer A, you see a black sock, and you know, with 100% certainty, there's a matching black sock in drawer B. Just like that, your uncertainty about drawer B is gone, just from peeking into A. And that secret, that knowledge that they're connected, it actually has a measurable value. In the language of information theory, it's worth n bits, 1 bit for every single pair of socks. This is huge. We've just put a number on that fuzzy idea of being more than the sum of its parts. The more is the information that connects them. And this brings us to the official term for what we just measured, mutual information. It's basically a fancy way of asking, how much does knowing about system A reduce my uncertainty about system B? With our socks, knowing about drawer A told us everything about drawer B. This secret, the fact that the pairs were matched, that is the mutual information. We just turned a feeling into a number. Okay, great. So now we've got a way to measure correlation. Now for the really wild part. Let's plug this idea back into the actual laws of the universe. This is where things get really cool.
So check this out. You've got this cosmic tug of war happening. On one side, you have physical entropy, disorder, which, left to its own devices, always wants to increase. But on the other side, you have mutual information, our measure of correlation, which naturally wants to decrease. If you just leave our sock drawers alone for long enough, things will get mixed up and the connection will be lost. So, how in the world does the universe build something as intensely correlated as a living cell?
The key that unlocks this whole puzzle is a concept called net surprisal. It's just a way of measuring how surprising something is compared to what you'd expect. A messy random room? Not surprising at all. That's the baseline. But a room where every single book is perfectly alphabetized by author? Whoa, now that is surprising.
And there it is. That's the connection. The mutual information between our sock drawers is just another way of saying it's the amount of surprise we feel when we find out they aren't random at all. They are connected. So measuring correlation is literally the same thing as measuring physical surprise.
So now that we have that connection, we can see how the universe is actively using energy to build these surprising correlated things. It does it with something we can call information engines.
You know how a heat engine works, right? It uses a heat difference to do work. Well, an information engine is kind of the flip side. It takes in work, ordered energy, and what it spits out isn't heat, it's mutual information. It creates correlation. But here's the crucial rule, the fine print. Order doesn't come for free. The amount of correlation you can create is directly tied to how much energy you're willing to spend. So what are these engines, really? Turns out they're everywhere. A camera? That's an information engine. It uses energy to create a correlation between the light out in the world and the chemicals on a piece of film. DNA replication? A perfect biological example. It uses chemical energy to make a nearly perfect copy. And life itself? You guessed it. It's the ultimate information engine. Okay, now let's zoom all the way out and see how this idea plays out on the biggest possible scale. Because this isn't just about cameras or cells, this is the story of the entire cosmos. What you're looking at here is the history of the universe, but told through this lens of information engines. And you see the same basic pattern again and again and again. You get an energy gradient, a difference in something like gravity or temperature that creates some kind of boundary. And then boom, a whole new, more complex layer of correlation can emerge inside that boundary. It started with gravity, making galaxies. Then temperature gradients lit up stars. Much later, simple cell walls created the space for life. And eventually, the boundaries between cultures allowed for things like science and complex societies. It's the same physical process, just scaling up over and over.
So all of this is very grand and cosmic, but so what? Can we actually take this theory and use it to understand something about our world right here, right now? The answer is a big, fat yes.
Let's take this incredible theoretical toolkit we've just put together and point it at one of the most complex systems we know, a human community.
One fascinating way to gauge the complexity of a community is to simply count the number of different roles or niches available to a person. Think about it. Are you just a worker? No way. You're also a friend, a parent, a sibling, a mentor, a neighbor, a fan of a sports team, an artist. Each one of those roles is a whole set of correlations, a different way of being connected.
And here's the real takeaway. If the average number of these roles starts to shrink, if people have fewer and fewer ways to define themselves and contribute, that could be a huge red flag. It might be a warning sign that the health of the entire community is declining, even if the economic numbers look totally fine. It's like a vital sign for social richness, grounded in the fundamental physics of the universe.
When you look at it this way, it's actually incredibly empowering. Complexity isn't some weird accident. It's just what the universe does when energy flows through it. It's been building this incredibly rich, correlated, complex world for almost 14 billion years. And now, it's our turn. So the only real question left is, what are we going to do with it?